James, something with you that I always teach my students is you are our poster child for vulnerability. And I have, like I said, an academy, and I teach people business and podcasting, public speaking. And I always say, if you can't get vulnerable, you're not going to be able to connect with the audience. And I always mention you. And it's always like, look at James Altucher. Look at almost every blog I've ever read of yours or anything. You're always telling us about how you started off in a failing scenario. And I was wondering if you could talk about why you're so comfortable being vulnerable and how far that's gotten you. And do you think it's a good tool for people to use?
Yeah, that's such a great question. It's so interesting. I don't know if I've thought about it exactly that way since sometime around 2010. I was always a little bit more vulnerable in my writing than a lot of my peers. But, if you go, I was a financial pundit for many years. I'd go on CNBC, I would dress in my suit, and I would talk about, with four other people in this big box of people, I would talk about what my feelings were on the economy and so on. And once I started being more vulnerable, these times I went broke, these times I was suicidal, these times the IRS closed down my house, or I lost my family, or whatever, people would always write to me at first and say, are you about to kill yourself, or did you have a brain tumor, or no one's ever going to invest in you again? You're revealing all this stuff. And what I found, though, was several things. One is your audience is an X-ray machine. They know, your listeners know, even if they don't know it consciously, they know if you're telling the truth about yourself or not. People, only 10% of communication is verbal. The rest is 90% is nonverbal. So people know there's something else going on here, but I can't put my finger on it, and they'll react that way whether they're realizing it or not. So to build trust and transparency, you have to be vulnerable. And then people say, "Oh, what you see is what you get. I see this guy, and so I trust what he's saying." But there's another thing too, which is, I think the word privacy has become this weird word lately. It's almost this legal word, do you have privacy or no privacy? But vulnerability is a way of trading some aspect of your privacy for freedom. So, for instance, when you talked about heroin, that was a very private thing for you, right? You said you held on to it for 16 years and didn't even tell your wife, let alone your audience. And so you traded that aspect of your privacy, and what did you get for it in return? You got freedom. Now there's more topics that you could talk about. There's more things that people know they can relate to you on. Your wife and family have a new comfort level with you, that they understand you at a deeper level. That's real, and I'm sure you felt it. This is freedom. And so it literally was a transaction. You took a chunk of your privacy, and you, just like you might trade dollars for some object, you traded the currency of your privacy for freedom. And I bet you felt that way. I bet you felt relief, because someone who is out of jail suddenly feels more relief. Oh, I'm free. And I bet your audience grew, because now people saw there was this whole extra dimension to you that A, you were hiding, and B, this discomfort that they might have felt with you before was gone.
Yeah, no, very much so. It was scary as hell as well, but it really opened that up. Yeah,
I try to always, whenever I write something, I just refuse to hit publish unless I'm afraid of what people will think, or at least what some people will think. So there has to be a fear component. Else, I'm just publishing the same thing everyone else is publishing.
Like
if I just say,
it's basically
here's my 10 rules for leadership. A million other people have written that, so I can't write that. I can't. There's no fear there. I have to write here's the 10 ways I was the worst leader. People hated me, and what I learned from it. So now there's I might be exposing some things in that people might even find repulsive. He did that as a leader, but we've all been there to some extent in our own lives. So again. It's part of also the art of storytelling is to be a little bit afraid of, you have to surprise yourself in order to surprise the reader. And then there's a third level, which is totally just about writing and storytelling, which is you want everything you do to have the arc of the hero. So when I failed living, and I've kind of gone broke and failed and been despondent several times over the decades. When I've been in a moment of failure, it's because I was sort of really scared of what people would think. I was living in some other guideline, some other path that somebody told me, like, oh, you have to go to college and then start a business and be successful. And once you're successful, you're smart and no one should ever know that you're stupid. So I was afraid to let people know that I didn't go on this straight path. So that's the ordinary world. And then, in the arc of the hero, you go from the ordinary world to the extraordinary. The extraordinary is when I admit failure and now I have to go on this very unusual path to find my way back. And that's going from the ordinary world to the extraordinary. And then along the way, you have bigger and bigger problems and you meet your new friends and people who will help you until finally you have the greatest crisis of all, and you bring it back to tell the story. Like you bring it back and you have a podcast or you write an article or whatever, and that's the full arc of the hero. So to some extent, it's also good storytelling. If I just say, hey, I'm the greatest person ever, listen to me, that's a horrible story.